I remember when Mel Brooks introduced, we were having dinner and I was signing the check. And then when I walked over, I saw Mel and Annie Bancroft talking to this couple. When I walked over, Mel started to introduce me to Colin Powell. And when he said to Colin, who was at that time the Secretary of State, and when he started to introduce me to Colin and said, "This is Harry Lorayne," Colin Powell said, "Harry Lorayne," and he literally threw his arms around me and said, "Harry, you helped make me a general." And then afterwards, when we talked about it, he said, "I use his systems all the time to remember the questions I thought were going to be asked, on whatever tests he was talking about."
Wow.
So that was, I remember, I know I met many, many famous people in my life, but only the few, like Colin Powell, of course, stands out. And Mel Brooks will always stand out because we traveled to Europe together, he and Annie and me and Renee, for 40 summers, for 40 years, for God's sakes.
Wow. It's interesting that you had mentioned Colin Powell, because I was going to ask you about him next, because this very next story after this one talking about Mr. Bloomberg is this story about Colin Powell. So your mind kind of connected those two together.
Yeah, because I remember, like I said, I met so many people, but unfortunately, not very many of them stayed in my mind. But this with Colin Powell, when he was still Secretary of State, I do remember.
Wow, fascinating. And the following story after that, it's talking about a time when, I don't know, pipe night. You call it pipe night at the Players, and it was kind of a night that would honor a special person. And this night there was Frank Sinatra, and you're just talking about you would often blurt out things that would either elicit a really, really great.
Oh yeah, this I remember.
So can you talk a little bit about that? Because it looks
I
like
don't know if we're thinking of the same thing. What I'm talking about, it was an actress by the name of Claudette Colbert.
Yes, sir. That's it. Yeah, that's
is
it.
that the one you're talking about?
Yeah.
Claudette Colbert was somewhere on a beach.
She's from a movie, It Happened One Night with Clark Gable. That's just so people know, reference who Claudette Colbert is. She's an actress. It Happened One Night with Clark Gable was probably something she was maybe best known for. But anyway, continue, please.
She was in the Caribbean with her husband, I think. And what happened, he had a heart attack. Her husband had a heart attack, I think. Anyway, he got sick. I do remember that. And she didn't know what to do. She called Frank Sinatra. That was the point of this thing. And Sinatra sent an airplane to pick them up. And the first thing he did, of course, is stop at a doctor's, to leave Claudette Colbert's husband. So that I do remember, what the reason I remember that, somewhere, I may have said it on an interview with me before, one of the biggest laughs I ever got that I remember was the head of the club that I belonged to at the time. I can't even recall the name, in New York City. Sinatra was sitting at the head table, and the president of the club at that time was telling this story that we're talking about. So when it came to the end, after he told about how Frank Sinatra flew to the Caribbean or sent a plane to the Caribbean to pick up Claudette Colbert and her husband, take him to a doctor, and we paused, there was a beat of silence. Oh, he ended by saying, this is the point. He said, so if you're ever in any kind of trouble, all you got to do is call Frank Sinatra. So there was a beat of silence, and I yelled out, what's his number? That got the big laugh, So I remember it because of that. That it was one of the biggest laughs I ever got when I yelled, sure, call Frank Sinatra, right? So when I said, and you know what happened? We became, I'm sure I've mentioned this to you before, we became not very close friends, but we got to be kind of friendly after that, because when the meeting was over, we were leaving, he came over to me and gave me a high five. And after that, all over the next decade or whatever, whenever I saw him, I remember seeing him out of America. We were sitting somewhere, Renee and I having dinner. He was with Princess Diana. I can't even think it begins with a name. I can't think what the heck is the name of the town. Anyway, He was walking with Diana as he passed me. He came over to me and did a high five, said hello, and he kept walking.
Jeez.
So that was the kind of friendship it was. Whenever we saw each other, we'd do a high five, say hello, that was it. We never sat down and had dinner together or anything like that, but we certainly knew and recognized each other.
What year was that when Sinatra? What
Oh,
do you know
God.
when that was? Like
A
30?
long time ago, I was living in New York City, obviously, and I belonged to this club. I was about to say, I can't remember the name, but I think it was called the Players Club.
Hmm.
And there were a lot of famous people belonged to it. I guess Sinatra obviously was one of them, etc.
Wow,
So I'm very glad I wrote that book because you mentioned some things, and now I have to be honest, I don't remember them at all.
wow.
Which was the point, like you said before, why I called it before I forget. I knew I was going to forget these things.
Hmm.
Not all of them, obviously, but I was going to forget a lot of things.
So, yeah, is it just inevitable, regardless of how trained your memory is, as yours is, ageless in many ways? Is it just inevitable that our minds they forget? It's just the natural progression of our brain.
I can only speak for myself, and my answer has to be, I think so. I don't know about other people. I can only speak for myself. Unless I could, just about a week ago, I don't know, somebody came to visit a woman. Anyway, I wanted to prove something to her for some reason. And she wrote a 20-digit number, which I memorized forwards and backwards. The point is, I can still do that only when I apply my systems, which I don't do very often anymore. You know why? Because it's too much like work. I
Mm.
mean, I did that for 100 years, for God's sakes, on stage, remembering numbers and a whole issue of a magazine and telephone numbers on different pages and etc. Yeah, which was fine. I got standing ovations for those kind of things. But now it's too much like work.
Wow.
But if I have to, like I wanted to show off for this lady, I can still do it if I apply my systems. Because, basically, it's a very simple idea. If I want to remember a long digit number, I simply make up words that I can visualize that represent the numbers in my mind according to my phonetic alphabet. And I do what I always call the link system. I linked one word to another, and then afterwards, each word told me the number.
Wow. So, Harry, how long does it take for you to do that? Once you have a 20-digit number, if I was going to do it, I have to sit there. It would take me, a couple of minutes to really sit there and go, okay, link that. How long does it take for you to do that? If you had just maybe even a 10-digit number, how long would it take you? Is it just?
Oh, it very quickly. I was very, I don't know if I could do it now. For example, give me a 3-digit number.
Okay. How about 729?
Can up. I see a can flying up in the air. That's it. I got it. Can up. K is 7 in my phonetic alphabet. In can. In other words, only the consonant sounds are important. So can up has to be 729. That's it. And I go to the next one. So now, if you said another thing, but give me another 3-digit number.
In fact, I have a deck of cards here and it has just a little 10-digit serial number here. So
All right.
can I read it off to you?
Yeah, give me, go ahead, read it off.
Okay. 738.
Hold it for a minute. Come off that thing. Go ahead.
540.
Leers. Come off, and the guy leers at me. Go ahead.
194.
Tapper. All right. Come off. He leers at me, and he just taps his foot because he's a tapper.
And then the last digit is 9.
Tapper, and he's tapping on a pie. Puss on his 9. So come off, leers at me, tapper, 9. Come off, 7, 3, 8, leers at me, 5, 4, 0, Tapper 194 on a pi 9. Did I
Yeah.
get it right? I can't
Yeah,
see
of
it.
course you did. Of course you did. I just want to
That's
put it
it.
up
So,
there.
my systems work. I don't, in other words, I'm doing this because you asked me, obviously, Rudy, whatever you asked me, I would do because you're a dear friend. But otherwise, I don't do that anymore. It's too much like work, you know.
Gosh, Harry, and
But
it's just, how quickly you come up with these words. I think one of the biggest problems that I've had when applying your systems, and of course they work, is coming up with those words like you just did, like leers. Okay, well, I wouldn't think leer. I would be struggling. Leer, what can I come up with? Yeah, the
540, yeah, that's a tough one. I'm trying to think it. Lears, lowers.
hmm,
Uh, the thing
hmm,
is, I'm surprised that I came up with some of the words that I just did. Because you got to remember when I was doing this on stage, I think I've gone through this with you before. Originally, I started to work with a friend whose name was Leslie. Like he's been going for 100 years. But we used to separate we used to do the memory act. He started me in it. His father, if I'm being repetitive, stop me.
oh, you're great.
His father, Leslie's father, owned a clothing company. At one time, Leslie wanted us to go and entertain his father and their friends. So we started to do the memory stuff together. He would do half of it. For example, I know I told you this. We would memorize a current magazine issue of Time magazine, but he would do the odd number pages, and I would do the even number pages. In other words, we split the memory work.
Mhm.
But Leslie was the kind of person, if it didn't come to mind, I know I've done this before. He used to do this
Mhm.
while he was thinking. And I don't like silence on stage. That's not my thing. I don't allow that. So in order to avoid that, I started to memorize the entire magazine. And when he did this, I would give him a hint. I didn't want silence on the stage. That's the point. So he kind of started me on it. So anyway, I don't know. I forgot what. I hate to use the word forget or forgotten. I don't remember what the point I was trying to make. The thing is, my systems still work. They work great. And I'll clench my dentures waiting for people to yell about my ego. But I don't care at my age because I'm telling it as it is. They work great, except I don't use them now unless it's absolutely necessary, as we did before, for me to remember a number because it's too much like work.
Yeah.
That's
And
it.
so for you, a number like the 10-digit number we just shared, does that linger on long, after our call's done? I mean, how long do you retain that? Or do you have to intentionally try to keep it in mind? Or like right now, I'm sure you remember it because we just did a couple just a few minutes ago, but how long does that stay in your brain?
Yeah, that's a good question. It was according to the situation. For example, when I was really working and very busy, I used to do very often. I would do 2 shows a day, one early in the evening at one hotel, and then they would book me for a late show at another hotel. My big problem was not to remember what was going to come up in the new appearance, but to forget what happened in the last appearance.
Oh, geez.
So yeah, but that worked almost automatically. For example, one of the things I always did, somebody called off 26, half a deck of cards that Renee would put on the blackboard, etc. But the long story short, when I had to remember the 26 cards in order to remember what the four guys behind me, one holding the clubs, the other the hearts, spades, diamonds, I had to know which was current rather than the one that happened in the show
Mm,
before. And in those years, that was easy for me. I knew what was current.
wow. Golly, that's just crazy. I mean,
Yeah,
it's crazy impressive. It's
I didn't have
astounding.
much shell. I didn't have much choice. You
Wow,
know,
Harry, that's really, really impressive. I'm
you
telling
know.
you.
I'll be very egotistical and say I was very good at what I did. I really was. Excuse me. The important point with that, and this always runs through my mind when I discuss these things with anybody, and I'm sure I've discussed it with you before. There were so many people decades ago that I used to I used to call them copycats. Then I started to call them ripoffs. I mean, there were people. They, I think I told you this. They would sit in the audience with a legal pad, staring at my face, at my mouth,
Mm,
because they wanted to put down every word I was saying,
mm-mm.
and then they would do exactly. Don't forget, I was teaching my systems and books anyway, so they could do the memory work, but they wanted to see how I presented it, etc. The point is that they put audiences to sleep. That's the point. In other words, look, I've told you this so many times. I was the shyest kid ever, but when I was a little boy, I wanted to be an entertainer. I
Mhm.
wanted to be like Danny Kaye. But come on, I realized I couldn't sing. I couldn't dance with the dance. So there was no way I was going to be like Danny Kaye. There was no way I was going to, do singing and dancing. I
Sure.
mean, come on, they shoot me, for God's sakes. I can't carry a tune in a basket, for God's sakes. You know, so, but I was very lucky coming up with what I could do and make it entertaining. That's the important point here. I've said this so many times, Rudy. What could be more boring than watching somebody remember things for an hour? I mean, come on, you know.
Yeah,
But I was a basic entertainer. I made people laugh.
anybody who's watched your work, and I thank God we have some of it on YouTube that we can look at. It's just astounding to watch you work. And anybody who witnessed that, I'm sure would attest that you were brilliant and still are at what you do. Again, you just proved here at, coming on 97 years, I just threw a random number at you. Even if it's only 10 digits, to me, it's still astounding, I think.
Well, you know what? To me, I think I've said that in one or two of my books that I wrote on memory. We all have great memories. We're all born with great memories. That's what the brain does, right? Uh, the thing is to use it differently, and I came up with ways to use it. In other words, if I the whole, the main word here is visual. I can do it, but I can't say it. Visual visualization.
There you go. I thought you were going to say something in French.
Exactly. Uh, you have to be able to visualize what you want to remember. That's the point. Association and visualization are the important parts of memory. If I can visualize it, that's it. That's what does it. That's what the mind is supposed to do.
You still got it. You have still got it all these years later. I'm just always
The
amazed.
fact that I can remember a number when I'm 96, yeah, sometimes I
Yeah,
shock myself. I really do.
yeah,
But what the heck?
yeah.
Uh,
It's incredible.
I don't know, in one way, maybe it's what's kept me alive this long. I don't know if keeping your mental capacity alive has anything to do with the physical capacity. I don't know. But
Mm.
like I said, started to say before, for somebody who started to smoke when he was 8 years old and ended up smoking 4 packs of cigarettes a day to live to 97 years old, it's kind of amazing. I don't know if it's a good thing. For there's a Jewish expression. I was just talking to the lady that comes to help me out once a week, and I said to her, we were talking about something like this, and I said the expression that comes to mind is a Jewish expression. Yiddish was my first language, and the expression that comes to mind is "schön genick." Schön genick means enough already. 97. Give me a break.
Oh, Harry. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm so glad that I'm able to count you as a friend. I think you're one of the most fascinating, amazing people that I've had the pleasure of knowing. And I just thank you for taking time to hang out and, share some stories with me. You amaze me, Harry, and thank you. That's I guess all I can say is just
You're thanking me. Thank you. What a nice thing for you to say. I wish you would record that somewhere.
thank
you know.
you.
All right. Thank you so much, Rudy. What a pleasure it is to see you and speak with you.
Same. All right. Love you, Harry.
Love you. Bye
Bye.
bye.